In today's episode, I sat down with Katie, beauty editor at LUSA. We talked about how she landed in writing, her ideal morning ritual, and how she manages her mental health as a writer. Get ready to have your cup poured into. Katie, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So let's go ahead and get started. So you grew up in Louisville, Colorado, and you went to the student voice of Monarch High School. And I saw there you were the print editor in chief.
Of our school newspaper, yeah, I was.
Yes. So that I think is really big to have. Is that where your passion for writing began? If not, where did your passion for writing begin?
Yeah, I guess kind of. I think that was my first time ever really trying anything journalism related. I've always been very into writing. I was like the little kid that was writing stories in my notebook, and like I had one of those, remember from like Legally Blonde when she had that orange MacBook with the
Yes,
handle?
yes, I remember.
Yeah, I my dad I guess had one of those in like the 90s, and then he passed it along to me when I was growing up. And it like didn't have internet or anything, but I literally used it to write a bunch of short stories and that kind of thing. So I've always been a big writer.
And do you think your passion for writing came about because maybe the books you read, or did you just have like a wild imagination?
Yeah, I think partially probably the books I read. I think a lot of it has to do with my parents, who are both writers. Right, they're teachers, but they also write. And I think I was just encouraged to try writing from a really young age. When I was in, I think, fifth grade, I had a teacher. Her name was Mrs. Wynn, and she really encouraged me to write. She was probably the first person that ever told me, like, "Hey, you're pretty good at this, and maybe like try writing a little bit outside class and like bring it to me to look at and that kind of thing." And so, yeah, I think just a lot of encouragement from a young age, a lot of books. I remember my dad used to like read all of the Harry Potter books out loud to me and my brother and put on like voices for all of the characters. So probably just a mixture of books and encouragement and maybe a little bit of natural writing in the family.
Oh, I love hearing stories like that where you have like the encouragement from like teachers or people like I guess older figures that you grew up with who really just encourage you because they can see like I guess a light in you that this is something you're good at and could be a future career or something you just do for fun in the future.
Yeah, no, it's really special to look back and think that I have a teacher that really encouraged me to kind of follow the career path I'm on now at such a young age.
Yeah, so after high school you went to the University of Colorado Boulder.
Hmm.
And there you studied journalism. What was the deciding factor for you? Like, this is what I want my career to be, and this is what, I'll continue on doing.
Yeah. What's funny is that I knew I wanted to do writing. And then when I went to college, I got it in my head that I couldn't actually do writing as a career path. I don't know why I thought that, but I was just like, I have to figure out a more practical way to live my life because writing doesn't feel very practical. Like I'll never make money, whatever. And so my first semester, I tried to declare advertising and I was just not good at it. And I didn't like it. And then I was considering doing nutrition and I didn't really like that either. And then finally I was like, I know I'm good at writing. I know I love writing. I'm just going to see, what I can do to try to make it my career and go for it. So I ended up deciding to be a journalism major, I think my sophomore year. And everything just kind of clicked.
I'm so surprised. Was it because once you got to college, you saw other people who were maybe in like that's so ironic you said that because I had that as a question, but I took it out. So I feel like when we're growing up, sometimes we may be told like, oh, you need to be like a teacher, or you need to be like a doctor, a nurse, because it's more like practical fields where you're guaranteed, like a steady income. Whereas writing is more like obviously you can still have a steady income with it. Hello, that's what you do for a living, but it is a little bit more of like an unconventional field where the how do I say it? It's just not a traditional field that I think most people say, like, when a kid's in kindergarten, what are you going to do when you grow up? And they're just like, oh, I'm going to be like a police officer, a teacher. Like, it's not as traditional of a field. What
Mhm.
made you second guess being a journalist, like doing declaring journalism as your major?
It's a good question. I mean, definitely not the most lucrative career path by any means. But I don't know. I think I just had so many friends that were going into the business school and things like that. And I also feel like I kind of grew up during a time where, I saw a lot of print magazines fold, and that was what I really loved as a kid. And it just kind of felt like a really tenuous time to try to go into journalism. Um, and so I kind of just tried everything else before being like, okay, this is what I really do want to do. So I might as well just kind of go for my dream here. And then, if something happens later on down the road where it's not really a like viable career anymore, then I'll pivot and I'll figure something else out. But I'll just kind of go with it for the time being and see where it takes me.
That makes sense. So, after you graduated from the University of Colorado Boulder, you obviously wanted to stick with it because you went to NYU to get your master's.
Mm-hmm.
What made you take that next step to get your master's? And I think you got it in magazine journalism, if I'm not mistaken.
I did, yeah. I think, I guess this partially does have to do with me deciding to go into journalism a little bit later, because I think had I known when I was 18 and choosing what college I wanted to go to that I really wanted to stick with journalism, I might have chosen a different university. And that's not to say that CU Boulder isn't a really great institution and that I didn't learn so much from going there, but I just knew I wanted to be in New York, knew I wanted to work in, lifestyle journalism of some sort. Um, and so I was just, I had not a ton of luck applying for internships in New York, applying for jobs, that kind of thing. And so I kind of just decided that maybe it would be good to see if I could get into a grad program. And then I applied to a few different ones and I ended up getting a scholarship at NYU. And so that's kind of what changed my mind or what made me decide that I wanted to go there. And yeah, it was, I think, all in all, a good decision. I went because I really wanted to write more long form journalism. And so that was kind of why I chose the magazine program. And it was a really fun program, really great. I feel like I learned so much and had so many really smart professors who taught me so much about writing and so much about reporting. And I also made some really great friends there. So yeah.
Okay, that makes sense, and I think obviously it's paid off because you worked for publications such as The Cut, Cosmopolitan, Good Housekeeping, Hello Giggles, which I think, in my opinion, are amazing publications. And today, you're a beauty editor at Who, What, Where.
Yeah.
So, what do
Yeah.
you? Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, you go ahead.
Okay. So, what do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions people have about writers?
Um, that's a good question. I think I don't know. I think maybe people think that writers don't do like real work is maybe something that people think about writers. Like I think that if you talk to somebody who's in like finance or business or something, they might think that being a writer is a little bit of like a fluffy career path. And I think it's a lot harder than people think. And I think there's a lot of really hard work that goes into it. And I also think that people might not realize what goes into writing stories for like a platform. Because it's not like I just sit down at my computer and write whatever comes to mind. There's, strategy behind it, and we're working on SEO terms. And a lot of times I'm assigned stories that make sense for whatever push that we're going for in a certain month or something. So definitely a lot more like thought goes into it than people might think too.
No, I definitely agree. I actually majored in public relations in undergrad.
Mm-hmm.
I went to the University of Florida, and in the program we had to take a reporting course. So when you said reporting earlier, I had like a little bit of flashbacks. And I also was on the school's newspaper. It was helpful to I think get extra credit for reporting classes. And I know like when we had to go through the process of it, you're given a story, you're given a deadline, and you have to wait for sources. You have to like transcribe the article. Sometimes like the original strategy you have for the story may have to change depending on which sources got back to you, or like if it relates to I think like what's going on with but I think like whatever may be going on in the world that may change like the strategy of your story. And I think people don't realize that. Um, yes,
Yeah,
writing. Oh, go ahead.
reporting is such a hard part of the job. And I think that, yeah, it's definitely one of the more challenging parts of doing journalism in general. Like when I first started doing journalism, I think that was the scariest thing for me. And it used to be like a source of major anxiety to call a source or even send an email. And especially if I had to meet a source in person, or like a lot of times in journalism classes, they'll kind of start you off with doing what they call man on the street reporting, where they'll just kind of be like, okay, your assignment is to go out in the world and just find three random people to talk to you on the street or something like that. And that used to give me so much anxiety, because I think that I'm maybe naturally a bit more of like a quiet, more reserved person. And so especially when I was in college and kind of still a little bit more unsure of who I was, I think that that used to just make me so stressed out. But it's something that you get better with as the years go by, I would say.
Yeah, that made me immediately think of like Humans of New York because I imagine whoever runs the account, that's what they do. So speaking of that, you said that having to do the man on the street and like reaching out to or while you're like going out into the public to talk to three different sources or three different people and interview them, that brought you anxiety. What were some things that help you to manage your mental health and your anxiety and get overcome that?
That's a good question. I mean, I think that anxiety is something that kind of ebbs and flows for me. And I think that it's something that I've coped with differently throughout the years. And it's always, it's always going to be there for me a little bit. I think that when I was younger, I used to feel it a lot more intensely. Um, and I also probably wasn't as good at coping with it as I am now. I will say going to therapy definitely helped me. Um, at one point in my life, I was like going pretty regularly, and I feel like that was really helpful. I am a big yoga person. I really like hot yoga specifically. There's a studio that I go to in the Lower East Side called Fierce Grace, and it's like my favorite place in the world. And that really helps me if I'm having like a particularly anxious day or week or something like that. I'm also a runner, and that helps me a lot. And then just like day to day, I personally really like cooking. And I find that that's something that really helps if I'm feeling anxious, because it's just something that you're doing with your hands, and it's something that you're like creating step by step. And so I personally find that to be a really calming thing for me. And then just like not being on my phone helps, because I just feel like right now, like our phones are probably for everyone just such a constant source of stress. So
Yes, I 1,000% agree. I've actually taken like a social media break from Instagram at least.
that
Just
sounds nice.
yes, it is. It's so nice. It's hard being in the field that I'm in, but it's needed because I just feel like I need the break. And I think you know how every week, I don't know if you have an iPhone, but you know how every week, if you
Mhm.
do have one, they send you the weekly update. Like this is how much you were on your phone this week, or different things like that. And then you
Oh my
can
God.
go look at yeah, and then you can see the breakdown of like which apps you use. It's like I literally go on Instagram to log off to go back on, and there's nothing new. There's nothing has changed. Nothing has happened. I'm just staring at the same five photos because Instagram and all their the way that they show content to you changes every week. I'm just like
Yeah.
yeah, I need like a little break from this because it's not that it's toxic. It's just I think like you said, sometimes we just need like a little break from it because we're all consumed in our phones in some type of way.
I know. It's so bad.
It is, it is. But I love that you said that you do cooking, you do hot yoga. I love hot yoga. I have to check out the studio you go to because I go to Y7 sometimes, but definitely love that you found different things like help, like you said, as your anxiety ebbs and flows, you found different things to help balance that out. As far as a therapist, I know you said you may not go as regularly as you did before. What was your process like with looking for a therapist? Because I make the joke to my friends that it's like dating because you have to find, you have to date around to find the right therapist for you. What was your process at the time when you were looking for a therapist?
It is so hard to find a therapist. And I feel like at the time that I was going really regularly, I think I was just at a point where I felt like I really did need to talk to somebody kind of outside of my orbit. And at that time, I was actually at NYU. I was just going through something that was like really stressful and just like really affecting me day to day. And I ended up going through, I was on like the student insurance plan. And so I went through them to find the therapist that I went to for probably the longest. And then it's actually funny because after I was done with NYU, I couldn't go to her anymore. And I loved her and I felt like she helped me so much. And then I feel like after that, I have tried a couple other times to find a therapist. And I just feel like I haven't meshed with anybody, or like people that I have meshed with, I can't afford with my current insurance. And so I think it's more challenging to find a therapist than it should be.
No, it is. I actually had a friend who said, like, I think it may be what you're like pointing at is that sometimes a good therapist costs more money, which
Mhm.
sometimes you have to pay more for things and it's worth it, but it's just the fact of paying for it. Sometimes it just doesn't fit within the budget. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. But sometimes it is very, I mean, probably always, but sometimes especially it's very worth the price.
I think it's always worth the price. I've never paid for anything that has been like, something that's more expensive and ever regretted it. I'm just like, you know what, I spent the money, but I don't regret a single moment of it.
Yeah, definitely.
So going a little bit more back to your career, you, like I said earlier, you've written for The Cut, Cosmopolitan, Good Housekeeping, and Hello Giggles. Now you're at Who What Wear. If I'm not mistaken, a year ago you had your first cover story with Lotto. What was the
Yeah.
process like, and how did your career path up until that point prepare you for that moment?
Oh my gosh, I always wanted to write a cover story. That was like one of my big life goals. And that process was, it was good. I remember our features editor reached out to me and it was going to be a beauty cover, which they wanted someone on the beauty team to write. And I love writing longer form stories. It's just like my bread and butter, my favorite thing to do. And they had asked me if I wanted to do the Lotto cover, and I said yes. And then um, I interviewed her. That was like, I guess, a little bit of a weirder time because we were still kind of more in a COVID era. And so I didn't get to like meet her in person or anything. But it went really well. And I think I just recently wrote another cover on, oh my gosh, why am I blanking on her name? One second.
Congrats, though.
Rachel Zegler. Sorry, I'm going to say that again. I just recently wrote another cover on Rachel Zegler, and I felt like the Lotto cover definitely just set me up for a little bit more success with that. And that was great. I got to meet her in person. I got to go to our shoot for a little bit for our cover photos, and it was just such a cool experience. And I actually recorded with Rachel for the Who What Wear podcast. So that was fun. And it was just a lot of firsts. And I feel just immensely grateful that I was able to do both of those.
Yes, congratulations. That's a big accomplishment.
Thank you. It was really cool.
And you said that you were able to record with her for the Who What Wear podcast. Is the name of the podcast is Who What Wear, I assume?
Yeah, Who What Wear. I think it's Who What Wear with Hillary Kerr.
Okay, okay. I will definitely put that in the show notes so people can go and check that out.
Yeah, definitely.
So, what advice would you give to someone who is just starting and who is just starting? I'm going to say that over.
No,
What
you're good.
advice would you give to someone who is just starting out writing for a publication?
I would say to just say yes. I think that's probably somebody gave me that advice when I was just starting out as like an intern. And I think that that really does get you far. Like if they need somebody to do an update post or, something kind of like a medial task or something like that, I would just say yes and do what you can to just be as helpful as possible. Because at the end of the day, even if it feels like something that isn't super important or like an annoying daily task or something like that, like that's the kind of thing that people are going to remember that you were willing to help out and just give it your all because you were so excited to be there and work your way up. And also just to be really nice to everybody because the industry is small, and it's really important to just have really good relationships. And you're also, especially if you're in beauty like I am, you're going to a lot of events, you're going to press trips, that kind of thing. And it's so much more fun to have a lot of friends in the industry, that you're genuinely excited to see. And, you have relationships that you've built with. And it's just, yeah. So I would say yes to things and be nice.
I love that advice. And I think I've gotten similar advice in the past. And I think applying that advice is all very true and accurate. You just never know who knows who or who could be the person that can lead you to your next career milestone or something. So definitely be nice and say yes to everything because you never know what it can lead you to.
Yeah, definitely. Especially when you're younger and you just have like less going on. I feel like in life, it's just, go to all of the fun events and meet everybody that you can because it will help you later.
And I think to kind of like to what you said when you first entered college, it'll help you to know more so what you maybe like how you want your career to go and what you
Mhm.
more so like to do versus not doing. So that way, when you do get busier in life, you're like, oh, I can say no to this event because I've done it before. I know this is something I don't like to do. Or, ooh, I'll say yes to this because I've done this before. I know this is something I like to do. Or it could be a new opportunity and you're like, hey, let me just try it out and see what happens.
Yeah, exactly. It is all good and character building and definitely just a good idea to say yes.
Agreed. And you kind of touched on this with the fact that you have to go on press trips. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I was never in the career path of wanting to be a writer, but with the rise of social media and I think like with influencer marketing, I feel like you as a writer and especially as a beauty writer, your job title has somewhat changed in the sense that you are seen more as an influencer and content creator as well as a writer. Would you agree or would you disagree?
Um, I don't know if I would consider myself that way. I do think that there is maybe a little bit more of an emphasis on being public facing, because I mean, it definitely is a good way to kind of, market your own stories and get noticed and things like that. But I think for the most part, and I know some people who definitely do kind of balance the line of journalist and influencer, and they do it really well. I feel like at this point, it's still, I would say, a personal choice if you do want to be more public facing, but I also think that it is maybe a little bit encouraged, with the way that the industry is now.
I see. Um, Speaking of the industry, I feel like in the past few months, the journalism industry has had a lot of changes with the way that publications have done restructuring to match like correct me if I'm wrong, like I think what I'm seeing is that they're trying to match how consumers consume media. And if consumers aren't consuming media a certain way, they've had to like restructure their business. Um, how do you see the field of journalism changing from what it has changed in the past few months, like where you see it going in the future?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's a little scary. I think that the industry is just a little bit, it's kind of a volatile industry sometimes, but it's also an industry that has proven to be pretty resilient, because people, people care. People still want to read stories, and people still need to get their news from somewhere. And I think that it's also a really exciting time to be in the industry because, different publications are innovating in new ways every day. And who knows what the next, platform or whatever people start getting news from or writing on or things like that. So it can be a little scary sometimes, but it's also exciting and cool to kind of be a part of seeing how it changes, because it does change a lot. And I feel like even from when I started, the industry is totally different than it was. And I'm sure it will be completely different again in the next 5 years and then the next 5 years after that. So, yeah.
No, I definitely agree with you. I always said, like, no matter what I did with my career, I didn't want it to be like something mundane in the sense that it felt like I was doing the same thing every day. And I think being in a field like writing and for me, like PR and social media, the fact that the industry changes so much, similar to what you said, from the moment I entered my career field till now, it kind of makes it the part that's exciting, where, you never know what's going to happen. And I think it keeps you being like that forever student.
Yeah, I totally agree. It is like being a forever student and always learning new things and kind of fine tuning your skills.
Yes, yes, yes. And what would you say? I know we talked about like your lotto cover and you also had your most recent cover feature. What would you say is one of your most proudest moments so far of your career?
My gosh. I guess, yeah, I either of my cover stories, and then I've done a couple other bigger features that have been a pretty big deal to me. I did a feature on sustainability the other year that I kind of pitched and ideated from start to finish. And that was really cool. And then when I was at Good Housekeeping, I think seeing my name in print was also really cool.
Yes, I agree. The first time I saw my name in print, it just felt like a very surreal moment because I think growing up, I think you mentioned like you had the magazines and things like 17 magazines. And I think, growing up and having those magazines, but then seeing your name in it now as an adult, it's like, wow, there's another little girl that's reading the magazines and I'm in there. And, maybe you could be her inspiration for the future.
I hope so. That would
You
be
are.
great.
You are. Um, what's one career goal that you haven't accomplished yet?
Oh my gosh. Um, I guess I would love to, at some point down the line, write a print cover story. I think that would be really cool. And that's always been a goal of mine. Um, and then I also, at some point, also probably very far down the line, I would love to write a book.
Ooh, what would your book be about?
My gosh, I don't know. Maybe fiction. Just like maybe flexing some different kind of writing muscles, maybe like creative nonfiction or something like that. Probably totally different than whatever I write on a day-to-day basis now. Like I don't think it would be beauty focused or anything.
Okay, so if you were to write a fiction book, what would the storyline be about? Do you
Oh my
know?
gosh.
Oh,
I do not know.
okay.
That will be to be determined.
Okay, I'm gonna be on the lookout for that.
Yeah,
So we've talked a lot about your career and just, like where you are today. I know you mentioned that you do hot yoga and other things. What would you say is your day to day, how you take care of your mental health and really just show up for yourself?
I try to work out most days if I can. Whether that means going on a run. I'm training for the New York City Marathon right now, so that's kind of like taking priority over other things is running at the moment. But I'll go on a run. I'll go to a workout class, which is kind of hard for me during the week, but if I can squeeze it in, I do. Or I also do like Melissa Wood Pilates videos. And those are like 15 minutes and so easy to squeeze in the morning or after work or whatever works in my schedule. And so I definitely make sure to do that. I also try to be really consistent with just like my morning routine because I feel like that just sets me up for success for the rest of the day. I try to wake up early enough to, I always make coffee like first thing in the morning. I'm somebody who has been drinking coffee since I was like far too young to be drinking coffee. But that's just like my morning ritual. I wake up, I make coffee. I try to wake up early enough to do the New York Times crossword puzzle. Um, or I'll read a book or something like that in the morning just to kind of center myself before my day starts. And then yeah, I mean, once I'm working, I feel like if I can, sometimes I'll try to take little walks, just like step away from my computer for like 10 minutes to clear my head sometimes helps. Um, and then, yeah, after work, I really enjoy cooking. So that's something I love doing. And if I'm not cooking, I love to just socialize with my friends, especially now, like in New York in the summer, I feel like it's so fun to meet your friends after work and sit outside and kind of hang out and talk about your days. And that always helps me. So I just feel like I feel so rejuvenated when I get to hang out with my friends. I'm definitely more of like an extrovert. So I feel like I get energy from being around other people.
I have to agree. I'm so excited that New York City is back, like with the summer energy. And I think
Mhm.
I don't know if you feel the same way. I feel like there's just more rooftops opening up this summer than normal.
It does feel like that. And a lot of backyard bars and things like that
Yes.
too.
Yes, and I'm kind of excited because I almost want to make like a what do they call it? A bucket list for the summer to just try as many as I can, just to get out there, you know?
No, I love that. You should. That sounds
Yeah.
like so fun.
No, I think I am just because, summertime in New York City, I think is like no other place in the world.
Oh
It's
my
fun.
God, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like my favorite time to be in. Even though it's like hot and gross and like smells like trash, I
Yeah.
still love it.
Especially downstairs on the train when you're waiting, everything's just hot, but
Oh,
you're just like, okay, I'm just ready to go, like wherever I'm going.
I know. There's like nothing worse than waiting for the train on like a 95-degree day in
Yeah.
August. Then you get to the office or wherever you're going, and you're like, I literally have to go stand in the bathroom for 10 minutes.
Yes. You have to have like little wet wipes with you to clean yourself up and like get ready
Yeah.
for the day. Yes. So I don't have any other questions. Is there anything that I didn't ask that you wanted to say?
I don't think so. I felt like this went well. I feel like we covered a lot of different things.
I'll have it in the show notes, but do you want to share with everyone how they can follow you on social medias and even to see some of the articles that you've written? I know you have a personal website as well.
Yeah, totally. Probably the best way to keep up with me is to just follow me on Instagram. My handle is KTBEROHN.
Alrighty, thank you so much, Katie, for being on the podcast today.
Thank you. This was really fun.
Yay. Can't wait until the next episode to get your cup filled. Follow us on our social media platforms at Pour Into My Cup on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and Pinterest. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast to stay updated when new episodes are released. Leave a review and pour into someone else's cup by sharing the podcast. And I have to ask, is your cup half empty or half full? Peace, love, happiness. Brashiba signing off.